She deserves it more, honey. Mom didn't even glance up from the 3-tiered cupcake display. She was perfecting, her manicured fingers adjusting each tiny decoration like it was a piece of art. Lena has always been more committed to her studies. You've always had other interests. I stood frozen in my parents' kitchen, fingers tightening around the medical school diploma still fresh in its sleek frame. My name, Dr. Claire Monroe, gleamed in gold lettering, just as valid, just as earned as my sister's. And yet in my mother's eyes, it might as well have been written in invisible ink. Mom, we graduated with identical honors, the exact same GPA. My voice was steady, but my stomach twisted. I don't understand why you and Dad are paying off all of Lena's student loans, but not mine. Mom sighed, finally looking at me with that all too familiar mix of mild disappointment and forced patience. Claire, your sister doesn't have a prestigious mentor like Dr. Whitmore guiding her career. You've had advantages she hasn't. Dr. Naomi Whitmore, the world-renowned neurosurgeon who had taken me under her wing. The woman who recognized my dedication and potential when my own parents refused to. That advantage had come at the cost of sleepless nights, relentless work, and proving myself over and over again. Meanwhile, Lena had spent her summers skiing in Aspen, secure in the knowledge that she had a financial safety net no matter what. So, I'm being punished for making my own way? I asked, my voice softer now, the weight of it all pressing down on my chest. Dad walked in, placing a hand on Mom's shoulder like he was bracing for impact. No one's punishing you, Claire. We're just being practical. Lena needs more help, and you've always been the resourceful one. Resourceful, that word. The one they always used to justify why Lena got all the attention, the support, the effortless path. When they skipped my high school science fair to fly across the country for her volleyball tournament. When she got a brand new car at 16, while I got Dad's beat-up hand-me-down. When I was encouraged to take out loans, while they quietly covered all of her tuition. Tomorrow was Lena's debt-free celebration party, a grand event at a high-rise rooftop venue. A party filled with family, friends, and faculty people who had been led to believe Lena had pulled herself up through sheer grit and determination. The invitations read, celebrating Dr. Lena Monroe's achievement, as if she had earned being debt-free, rather than having it handed to her on a silver platter. I need to get going, I muttered, grabbing my bag. Early shift at the hospital. Claire, Mom's voice stopped me at the door. You'll still be at Lena's party, right? She didn't sound worried about me, just worried about what people would think if I wasn't there. I swallowed back the bitterness and nodded. Yeah, I'll be there. As I walked out, my phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Whitmore. Need to speak with you urgently about the McAllister Fellowship. Big news. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. The McAllister Fellowship, the most prestigious research position in the country. Only one graduating medical student nationwide would be selected, and suddenly, I knew. My parents' favoritism wasn't just cruel, it was about to become humiliating, and there was nothing I could do to stop what was coming. The morning of Lena's celebration, I met Dr. Whitmore in her office. She was the kind of woman who commanded attention, effortlessly silver hair swept into a neat bun, sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Her office walls were lined with awards, published research, and framed photos of her standing alongside some of the biggest names in medicine. Sit, she said, gesturing to the leather chair across from her desk. I perched on the edge, heart hammering. I'd spent weeks waiting to hear back about the McAllister Fellowship, barely allowing myself to hope. Dr. Whitmore folded her hands on the desk. The committee has made their decision. She paused, expression unreadable. Claire, they've chosen you. The world tilted for a second. The word got stuck in my throat. I got it? Her lips twitched into a rare smile. You got it. A sharp breath left me as disbelief, joy, and validation crashed over me all at once. This wasn't just any fellowship. This was the fellowship offering full loan forgiveness, a generous stipend, and a direct path into one of the most competitive neurosurgical research programs in the country. Only one student in the entire nation was selected each year, and that student was me. You earned this, Dr. Whitmore continued, voice firm. Your work in neurovascular regeneration was groundbreaking. The committee was particularly impressed with your dual method approach, surgical and pharmacological. Claire, you're going to Boston. Boston. Not just a new city, a new life. One where my accomplishments couldn't be dismissed, minimized, or ignored. There's one more thing, she said. Your parents invited me to Lena's celebration tonight. A courtesy to faculty, I assume, not realizing the depth of our mentorship. I frowned. They didn't mention that. They wouldn't. She leaned back, watching me. I'd like to announce the fellowship news there, publicly. My stomach twisted. I don't know, Dr. Whitmore. Tonight is supposed to be about Lena. Her expression hardened slightly. Claire, I've seen how your family operates. I've heard the way they speak about you at hospital events. If this news isn't made public, they will find a way to downplay it. Maybe even ignore it entirely. I swallowed. She wasn't wrong. If I told my parents privately, they'd probably smile stiffly, say something vague like that's nice, dear, then move on. If Dr. Whitmore announced it at Lena's party, however, they wouldn't be able to brush it aside. I hesitated. It feels like stealing her spotlight. Dr. Whitmore's gaze was piercing. Claire, you've spent your entire life standing in the shadows. It's time to step forward. I exhaled slowly, nodding. All right, let's do it. That evening, I arrived at the venue, a sleek rooftop restaurant with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. My parents had really gone all out for Lena. Elegant white tablecloths, soft candlelight, a full open bar. And right in the center of it all was a massive banner that read, "Congratulations, Dr. Lena Monroe." No mention of me. I clenched my jaw and smoothed down my navy dress. I wasn't here to pick a fight. But God, did they make it easy. Claire! I turned to see Lena weaving through the crowd, silver cocktail dress shimmering under the lights. She looked stunning, as always, identical to me in features, yet somehow always the one people noticed first. Thank God you're here, she groaned, linking her arm through mine. If one more relative asks if I'm dating someone, I'm throwing myself off this rooftop. Despite everything, I laughed. What'd you tell them? That I'm married to medicine, but if they know any single neurosurgeons, I'm taking applications. I snorted, shaking my head. Of course you are, she sighed, glancing around. Mom really went overboard, huh? Yeah, I muttered. You could say that. She lowered her voice. It's embarrassing. She made this such a big deal. I kept telling them, Claire graduated too, we graduated. But, well, you know how they are. I blinked, caught off guard. Had she actually noticed? Before I could say anything, Mom appeared, champagne in hand. Lena, the Hendersons just arrived. You remember Thomas Henderson, right? Chief of surgery at Memorial? Lena forced a polite smile. Yeah, of course. Come say hello, Mom said, tugging her away. Then, turning to me as an afterthought, oh, Claire, could you check with the caterers? Your cousin Beth is being impossible about the gluten-free options. And just like that, I was demoted to food runner while Lena was paraded in front of hospital administrators. Same old story. I made my way toward the catering staff, but before I got there, a familiar voice called out, Dr. Monroe. I turned to see Dr. Whitmore, standing near a group of faculty members. She was wearing a deep red pantsuit, effortlessly commanding the room. Are you ready? She asked, voice low. I exhaled. As I'll ever be. At that moment, my father tapped his glass for attention. The chatter died down as he stood at the front of the room, arm around Mom, smiling at Lena like she was the only person who mattered. Thank you all for coming to celebrate our incredible daughter, Lena, he began. Medical school is no easy journey, and to graduate debt-free is truly something special. Applause, smiles, murmurs of admiration. I gritted my teeth, as if she'd done that on her own. Mom stepped forward. We always believed in investing in Lena's future, because we knew she'd make us proud. There it was, the subtle, unspoken statement. We invested in her, not Claire. The first stared at my plate, fingers tightening around my napkin. But then, I'd like to say something, Lena said suddenly, standing up. The room quieted, surprised. My parents looked confused, a flicker of discomfort crossing their faces. This celebration feels incomplete, Lena continued, looking directly at me. Claire and I both graduated. We worked just as hard, maybe even harder in her case, because she did it without the same support system I had. Silence. My parents stiffened. Jessica, Mom whispered, her voice tight. This isn't the time. It's exactly the time, Lena shot back. I can't accept recognition that excludes my sister. It's not right, and it never has been. Emotion swelled in my throat. I'd spent years thinking Lena didn't notice. That she didn't care. But here she was, standing up for me in front of everyone. Then Dr. Whitmore stood. "If I may add to this conversation," she said, her authoritative voice cutting through the tension, "this seems like the perfect moment to share some news that many of you may not know." She turned to face the crowd. "Claire has been awarded the McAllister Fellowship." Gasps, murmurs, heads turned toward me. "The most prestigious research fellowship in the country," Dr. Whitmore continued. "Full loan forgiveness, stipend, a future in one of the top neurosurgical research teams in the nation." A ripple of shock spread through the room. I looked at my parents. They were frozen, their carefully constructed narrative crumbling right before their eyes. For the first time, I wasn't invisible, and it felt damn good. The moment Dr. Whitmore finished speaking, the air in the room shifted. It wasn't just surprise, it was shock. The kind that takes a second to register before it ripples through the crowd, turning polite murmurs into full-blown conversations. Heads swiveled toward me, expressions ranging from admiration to pure disbelief. At the head table, my parents sat frozen, their smiles still plastered on but hollow now, as if they'd been caught in the middle of a lie. Lena broke the silence first. "Claire," she said, beaming, "why didn't you tell me?" I swallowed, still trying to process the moment myself. "I just found out this morning." Someone near the front of the room, the dean of my med school, let out a low whistle. "The McAllister Fellowship? That's no joke, Doctor." Margaret Wu, the head of neurosurgery at Detroit Memorial, leaned forward. "I'd love to hear more about your research, Claire." "That's a remarkable achievement." More whispers, more shifting attention, more people looking at me for once. Dr. Whitmore wasn't done. "I should also mention that, in recognition of Claire's extraordinary contributions to our research, we've arranged for the remainder of her medical school loans to be covered through our department's merit fund." Another gasp, another round of murmurs. I was debt-free, not because of my parents, not because of a handout, but because I had earned it. For the first time all night, my mother's expression cracked. Her carefully controlled mask of social grace slipped, replaced by something raw, something dangerously close to panic. She was losing control of the narrative. Lena raised her glass. "Then we should toast to both of us." She smiled, looking around the room, to new beginnings. A beat of silence, then scattered applause. I saw the hesitation on some faces, guests, unsure if they should be celebrating me when this was supposed to be Lena's night, but slowly, glasses lifted. "To new beginnings," a few people echoed. I clinked my glass against Lena's. "Thank you," I murmured. "For what?" she asked. "For saying something. For seeing me." She squeezed my hand. I should have done it sooner. Across the room, my parents still hadn't moved. After dinner, the party dynamic had shifted completely. Before the announcement, I had been an afterthought. Guests had gravitated toward Lena, my parents parading her around like their prize-winning daughter. I had been background noise. But now people wanted to talk to me. Faculty members I had barely exchanged words with before were suddenly fascinated by my research. Former classmates who had never bothered to acknowledge me were now congratulating me like we were old friends. I wasn't naive. I knew some of it was fake. That the same people who had ignored me before were now eager to associate with success. But part of me didn't care. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just Lena's sister. I was Claire Monroe. And people finally saw me. I stepped outside onto the terrace, needing a break from the overwhelming energy inside. The city lights stretched out before me, glittering against the dark sky. I heard the door open behind me, soft footsteps approaching. "Mom." I sighed, bracing myself. "That was quite the surprise," she said, her voice even. I didn't turn around. Yeah, it was. She stepped beside me, arms crossed over her designer dress. "You should have told us." I let out a dry laugh. Would it have mattered? Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Claire, you know we love you," I scoffed. "Do I?" She flinched. "That's not fair." "No," I said, finally looking at her. "What's not fair is you pretending this is about me, not telling you when the truth is. You just don't like that people are noticing me now." Her face hardened. "That's not true, isn't it?" I turned fully to face her. "You didn't even put my name on the banner, Mom." A flicker of guilt crossed her face, quickly masked. "We wanted to keep things simple." I laughed, shaking my head. right? Simple. A long silence stretched between us. You've always been so independent, she finally said. Lena needed more support. I exhaled sharply. You keep saying that, like it excuses everything. But it doesn't. It doesn't explain why you showed up for all of her games, but not my research presentations. It doesn't explain why you celebrated her accomplishments like they were the center of the universe, while mine were just footnotes. She stayed quiet. I swallowed, my voice softer now. Did you ever think that maybe I needed support too? She looked away, her fingers gripping the edge of the railing. I'm proud of you, she said, but it sounded forced. I studied her carefully. Are you? She didn't answer right away, and that told me everything I needed to know. Back inside, Dad was waiting for me near the bar. Claire, he said, offering a stiff smile. Can we talk? I sighed. What now? He hesitated, like he was choosing his words carefully. Your mother is just surprised. You have to understand. She's always been very focused on Lena. I finished for him. He rubbed the back of his neck. That's not what I was going to say. But it's true, isn't it? His silence was confirmation enough. I know you probably think we've treated you unfairly, he said, but we have supported you. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Name one time. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I let out a dry laugh. Thought so. Another awkward pause. Finally, he sighed. We only have so much money, Claire. We had to make choices. Yeah, and you always chose her. Dad looked away, jaw tight. I shook my head. You know what? It doesn't even matter anymore. He frowned. What do you mean? I met his gaze, steady and sure. I don't need you to choose me anymore. A flicker of something regret maybe crossed his face. Claire, I have to go, I said, cutting him off. Dr. Whitmore is introducing me to some faculty members from Boston, and with that, I walked away. For the rest of the night, I didn't seek out my parents. They lingered at the edges of the party, watching as I was pulled into conversations with people who finally saw me for who I was. Lena stuck by my side most of the night, deflecting questions about her own future by redirecting the spotlight to me. By the time the evening ended, the cracks in my parents' perfect image were fully exposed. They couldn't pretend anymore. And honestly, I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing their approval. I had something better. I had earned respect, and no one, not even them, could take that away from me. By the time I left the party, I was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. The weight of the evening still clung to me, the sudden shift in attention, Lena's unexpected support, and my parents' stunned silence as the narrative they had built crumbled around them. I should have felt victorious. Instead, all I felt was hollow. I drove home in silence, headlights cutting through the dark streets. When I reached my apartment, I barely had the energy to kick off my heels before collapsing onto my couch. Then, my phone buzzed. I hesitated before looking. Mom, we need to talk. Of course we did. I tossed my phone onto the coffee table and leaned back, closing my eyes. But sleep didn't come easy that night. The next morning, I woke up to 5 missed calls from Dad. Lena had texted too. Lena, Mom's losing it. Just a heads up. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I should have known they wouldn't let last night go. As if on cue, a knock sounded at my door. I dragged myself up and opened it to find my parents standing there, looking off. Mom's makeup was more smudged than usual, like she hadn't gotten much sleep. Dad was holding a small box, shifting uncomfortably on his feet. We thought we'd stop by, Mom said, trying to sound casual. I stepped aside, wordlessly letting them in. They sat stiffly on my couch, and Dad set the box on my coffee table. We got you something, he said. I didn't move to open it. Why? Mom let out a breath. Because we want to acknowledge your achievement. I stared at them. Now you do? Dad shifted. Claire. I finally opened the box. Inside was a delicate rose gold watch. Expensive. Identical to the one they had given Lena for her birthday 6 months ago. My stomach twisted. This is nice, I said carefully, but it doesn't fix anything. Dad frowned. We're trying, Claire. Are you? I looked between them. Or are you just trying to make yourselves feel better? Mom's face tightened. That's not fair. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Fair? You're really going to use that word with me? Claire, we love you, Dad insisted. We always have. I let out a slow breath. Maybe you do, but you sure as hell didn't treat me like it." A heavy silence filled the room. "We didn't mean to make you feel this way," Mom said, voice softer now. I studied her. "Then why did you?" She had no answer. I sighed. "Look, I don't need the watch. I don't need some last-minute gesture. What I needed was parents who saw me the way you saw Lena. And now, it's too late." Dad looked pained. "Claire, please, I have a shift soon," I said, standing up. "You should go." They hesitated, but eventually they did. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for letting them walk away. Over the next few days, news of my fellowship spread fast. My inbox flooded with emails former classmates, professors, even people who had barely acknowledged me before, suddenly eager to reconnect. But the biggest surprise came when Dr. Wu reached out. "Dr. Wu, Claire, I'd love to discuss the possibility of you bringing your research to Detroit Memorial instead of Boston. Let's talk." I stared at the message, stunned. Detroit Memorial had been my parents' dream for Lena. The hospital they had spent years grooming her for, building connections, pushing her toward. And now, they wanted me. It was the kind of irony I could almost laugh at. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat with it, letting the power of the moment sink in. For once, I had options, real options, not ones given to me, not ones handed down because of favoritism, but ones I had earned, and that was worth more than any validation my parents could ever give me. A few days later, Lena showed up at my door. She was holding 2 coffee cups, wearing her usual post-shift scrubs, looking exhausted. "Peace offering?" she asked, handing me one. I smirked, taking it. "You didn't do anything wrong." She plopped onto my couch with a sigh. "Yeah, well, Mom's still spiraling. She won't stop talking about how you must hate them now." I rolled my eyes. "I don't hate them." Lena looked at me. "But you don't forgive them either." I was quiet for a moment. "I don't know if I can." She nodded, as if she understood. For a long time, we just sat there, sipping coffee, the unspoken weight of the past few weeks lingering between us. Then, Lena sighed. "I still can't believe they reached out to you for the Detroit Memorial position." I let out a breath. "Yeah," she studied me. "Are you going to take it?" I hesitated. "I don't know yet." Truthfully, I did know. I was going to Boston, not because I wanted to run away from my parents, but because I wanted something that was mine. Lena must have seen the answer in my face because she gave a small smile. "I'm gonna miss you." "I'll miss you too," I admitted, and I meant it. For all the resentment I had felt over the years, Lena had never been the enemy. It had always been them, the ones who created the divide, but we didn't have to let them define us anymore. That night, I sent my official response to Dr. Wu. "Dr. Wu, thank you for the opportunity. I'm honored by your interest, but I've decided to accept the McAllister Fellowship in Boston. I hope our paths cross again in the future." I hit send, exhaling. The decision was final, and for the first time, I felt free. The final weeks before my move passed in a blur of packing, paperwork, and saying goodbye. Lena and I saw each other constantly grabbing coffee between shifts, helping each other pack, pretending that things weren't about to change forever. But my parents? Silence. No texts, no calls, not even a half-hearted attempt to convince me to stay. I told myself it was for the best, that their absence was proof of everything I had spent my life trying to deny. But some nights, when I was alone in my half-empty apartment, I caught myself wondering, had they just given up on me? Then, 3 days before my flight, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mom standing there, clutching a neatly wrapped package. For a second, we just stared at each other. "You're really leaving," she finally said. I folded my arms. "I told you I was." She let out a small sigh. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. She perched on the edge of my couch like she didn't belong there, fingers smoothing over the package in her lap. "I wanted to give you something." I said nothing, waiting. She placed the package on the coffee table. "It's your baby book." I blinked. "What?" She looked away. "I found it while I was cleaning out the attic. Thought you might want it." I stared at the package like it might explode. "You kept one for me?" Her lips pressed together. "Of course I did." The word stung in a way I hadn't expected, because I had wondered. I had spent years assuming she had only made one for Lena, documenting her first steps, her first words, her first everything, while I had been the afterthought. I swallowed hard. "Thanks." She nodded, folding her hands in her lap. Claire, I know you think we were unfair to you. I let out a sharp breath. Think. Her expression faltered. I mean, I know we made mistakes. I waited for the rest of it. For an I'm sorry, for I should have done better. For you deserved more than what we gave you. But it never came. Instead, she gave a small, practiced smile. You've always been so independent. I thought you didn't need us the way Lena did. A familiar ache settled in my chest. She still didn't get it. Everyone needs support, Mom, I said quietly. She flinched slightly but covered it with a nod. I suppose so. We sat in silence for a long time. Then she stood. Well, I just wanted to bring that by. I won't keep you. I followed her to the door, stomach twisted in knots. She hesitated before stepping out. Good luck in Boston, Claire. Not I'll miss you. Not I'm proud of you. Just good luck. And somehow, that hurt more than if she had said nothing at all. That night, I sat on my floor, the baby book in front of me. I wasn't sure I wanted to open it, but eventually curiosity won. I flipped to the first page. Claire Elise Monroe, born 6 minutes before her twin sister, Lena Marie Monroe. 6 minutes. That was all that had separated us. The first few pages were filled with the usual things: hospital bracelets, birth certificates, newborn photos. Then came the handwritten notes. Claire is quiet, always watching. Lena is the loud one, full of energy. Claire likes books more than dolls. Lena loves attention. I flipped through more pages, watching the pattern unfold. Lena, the bold and fearless one. Me, the quiet and capable one. The roles had been set from the beginning, and Mom had simply stuck to the script. My throat tightened. For so long, I had believed I wasn't enough. That if I had just been more outgoing, more expressive, more like Lena, maybe they would have seen me. But now, looking at these pages, I realized the truth. It had never been about me not being enough. It had been about them never seeing me in the first place. I closed the book, and for the first time, I felt something close to peace. The day before my flight, Lena and I sat on my bedroom floor, eating takeout straight from the boxes. She picked at her food, unusually quiet. So, she said finally, "You ready?" I exhaled. "As I'll ever be." She chewed her lip. "You know, Mom's been a wreck since she saw you." I snorted. "She didn't seem like a wreck." "Well, she's not good at it." Lena sighed. "She keeps saying she doesn't understand why you're so mad." I rubbed my temples. "Of course she doesn't." Lena hesitated. "Are you ever going to forgive them?" I swallowed. "I don't know." She nodded like she had expected that answer. "I get it." I studied her. "Are you ever going to call them out on their bullshit?" She let out a dry laugh. "I don't know." We both sat in silence for a moment, then burst into quiet, tired laughter. "Look at us," Lena muttered. "So emotionally well-adjusted." I smirked. "Therapists would have a field day." She nudged my foot with hers. "You'll call me when you get there?" I nodded. "Of course." She hesitated again. "You're really not coming back, are you?" I exhaled. "I don't think so." She swallowed, looking down at her food. "Yeah, I figured." A beat of silence. Then she looked at me, small smile on her lips. "Go be brilliant, okay?" I smiled back. "You too." And for the first time, we weren't just sisters caught in the middle of our parents' mess. We were just us. And that was enough. The next morning, I stood at the airport, staring at my boarding pass. One-way ticket. Boston. A new life. A new beginning. A place where I wasn't just Lena's sister or the forgotten twin. I was me. My phone buzzed. A text from my dad. "Dad, good luck in Boston. I hope you find what you're looking for." I stared at it for a long moment. Then, I turned off my phone, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the plane. Because I already had. The final weeks before my move passed in a blur of packing, paperwork, and saying goodbye. Lena and I saw each other constantly grabbing coffee between shifts, helping each other pack, pretending that things weren't about to change forever. But my parents? Silence. No texts. No calls. Not even a half-hearted attempt to convince me to stay. I told myself it was for the best, that their absence was proof of everything I had spent my life trying to deny. But some nights, when I was alone in my half-empty apartment, I caught myself wondering had they just given up on me. Then, 3 days before my flight, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mom standing there, clutching a neatly wrapped package. For a second, we just stared at each other. "You're really leaving," she finally said. I folded my arms. I told you I was. She let out a small sigh. Can I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. She perched on the edge of my couch like she didn't belong there, fingers smoothing over the package in her lap. I wanted to give you something. I said nothing. Waiting. She placed the package on the coffee table. It's your baby book. I blinked. What? She looked away. I found it while I was cleaning out the attic. Thought you might want it. I stared at the package like it might explode. You kept one for me? Her lips pressed together. Of course I did. The words stung in a way I hadn't expected, because I had wondered. I had spent years assuming she had only made one for Lena, documenting her first steps, her first words, her first everything, while I had been the afterthought. I swallowed hard. Thanks. She nodded, folding her hands in her lap. Claire, I know you think we were unfair to you. I let out a sharp breath. Think? Her expression faltered. I know we made mistakes. I waited for the rest of it. And I'm sorry, for I should have done better. For you deserved more than what we gave you. But it never came. Instead, she gave a small, practiced smile. You've always been so independent. I thought you didn't need us the way Lena did. A familiar ache settled in my chest. She still didn't get it. Everyone needs support, Mom, I said quietly. She flinched slightly but covered it with a nod. I suppose so. We sat in silence for a long time. Then she stood. Well, I just wanted to bring that by. I won't keep you. I followed her to the door, stomach twisted in knots. She hesitated before stepping out. Good luck in Boston, Claire. Not I'll miss you. Not I'm proud of you. Just good luck. And somehow, that hurt more than if she had said nothing at all. That night, I sat on my floor, the baby book in front of me. I wasn't sure I wanted to open it, but eventually curiosity won. I flipped to the first page. Claire Elise Monroe, born 6 minutes before her twin sister, Lena Marie Monroe. 6 minutes. That was all that had separated us. The first few pages were filled with the usual things: hospital bracelets, birth certificates, newborn photos. Then came the handwritten notes. Claire is quiet, always watching. Lena is the loud one, full of energy. Claire likes books more than dolls. Lena loves attention. I flipped through more pages, watching the pattern unfold. Lena, the bold and fearless one. Me, the quiet and capable one. The roles had been set from the beginning, and Mom had simply stuck to the script. My throat tightened. For so long, I had believed I wasn't enough. That if I had just been more outgoing, more expressive, more like Lena, maybe they would have seen me. But now, looking at these pages, I realized the truth. It had never been about me not being enough. It had been about them never seeing me in the first place. I closed the book, and for the first time, I felt something close to peace. The day before my flight, Lena and I sat on my bedroom floor, eating takeout straight from the boxes. She picked at her food, unusually quiet. So, she said finally, "You ready?" I exhaled. "As I'll ever be," she chewed her lip. "You know, Mom's been a wreck since she saw you." I snorted. She didn't seem like a wreck. "Well, she's not good at it," Lena sighed. "She keeps saying she doesn't understand why you're so mad." I rubbed my temples. "Of course she doesn't." Lena hesitated. "Are you ever going to forgive them?" I swallowed. "I don't know." She nodded like she had expected that answer. "I get it." I studied her. "Are you ever going to call them out on their bullshit?" She let out a dry laugh. "I don't know." We both sat in silence for a moment, then burst into quiet, tired laughter. "Look at us," Lena muttered. "So emotionally well-adjusted," I smirked. "Therapists would have a field day." She nudged my foot with hers. "You'll call me when you get there?" I nodded. "Of course." She hesitated again. "You're really not coming back, are you?" I exhaled. "I don't think so." She swallowed, looking down at her food. "Yeah," I figured. A beat of silence. Then she looked at me, small smile on her lips. "Go be brilliant, okay?" I smiled back, "You too." And for the first time, we weren't just sisters caught in the middle of our parents' mess. We were just us. And that was enough. The next morning, I stood at the airport staring at my boarding pass. One-way ticket. Boston. A new life. A new beginning. A place where I wasn't just Lena's sister or the forgotten twin. I was me. My phone buzzed. A text from my dad. "Dad, good luck in Boston. I hope you find what you're looking for." I stared at it for a long moment. Then, I turned off my phone, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the plane. Because I already had. The final weeks before my move passed in a blur of packing, paperwork, and saying goodbye. Lena and I saw each other constantly grabbing coffee between shifts, helping each other pack, pretending that things weren't about to change forever. But my parents? Silence. No texts. No calls. Not even a half-hearted attempt to convince me to stay. I told myself it was for the best. That their absence was proof of everything I had spent my life trying to deny. But some nights, when I was alone in my half-empty apartment, I caught myself wondering had they just given up on me. Then, 3 days before my flight, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mom standing there, clutching a neatly wrapped package. For a second, we just stared at each other. "You're really leaving," she finally said. I folded my arms. "I told you I was." She let out a small sigh. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. She perched on the edge of my couch like she didn't belong there, fingers smoothing over the package in her lap. "I wanted to give you something." I said nothing, waiting. She placed the package on the coffee table. "It's your baby book." I blinked. "What?" She looked away. "I found it while I was cleaning out the attic. Thought you might want it." I stared at the package like it might explode. "You kept one for me?" Her lips pressed together. Of course I did. The words stung in a way I hadn't expected, because I had wondered. I had spent years assuming she had only made one for Lena, documenting her first steps, her first words, her first everything while I had been the afterthought. I swallowed hard. "Thanks," she nodded, folding her hands in her lap. "Claire, I know you think we were unfair to you." I let out a sharp breath. "Think?" Her expression faltered. "I mean, I know we made mistakes." I waited for the rest of it, for an "I'm sorry," for "I should have done better," for "you deserved more than what we gave you." But it never came. Instead, she gave a small, practiced smile. "You've always been so independent. I thought you didn't need us the way Lena did." A familiar ache settled in my chest. She still didn't get it. "Everyone needs support, Mom," I said quietly. She flinched slightly but covered it with a nod. "I suppose so." We sat in silence for a long time. Then she stood. "Well, I just wanted to bring that by. I won't keep you." I followed her to the door, stomach twisted in knots. She hesitated before stepping out. "Good luck in Boston, Claire. Not I'll miss you. Not I'm proud of you. Just good luck." And somehow, that hurt more than if she had said nothing at all. That night, I sat on my floor, the baby book in front of me. I wasn't sure I wanted to open it, but eventually, curiosity won. I flipped to the first page. Claire Elise Monroe, born 6 minutes before her twin sister, Lena Marie Monroe. 6 minutes. That was all that had separated us. The first few pages were filled with the usual things: hospital bracelets, birth certificates, newborn photos. Then came the handwritten notes. Claire's quiet, always watching. Lena is the loud one, full of energy. Claire likes books more than dolls. Lena loves attention. I flipped through more pages, watching the pattern unfold. Lena, the bold and fearless one. Me, the quiet and capable one. The roles had been set from the beginning, and Mom had simply stuck to the script. My throat tightened. For so long, I had believed I wasn't enough. That if I had just been more outgoing, more expressive, more like Lena, maybe they would have seen me. But now, looking at these pages, I realized the truth. It had never been about me not being enough. It had been about them never seeing me in the first place. I closed the book, and for the first time, I felt something close to peace. The day before my flight, Lena and I sat on my bedroom floor, eating takeout straight from the boxes. She picked at her food, unusually quiet. "So," she said finally. "You ready?" I exhaled. "As I'll ever be." She chewed her lip. "You know Mom's been a wreck since she saw you." I snorted. "She didn't seem like a wreck." "Well, she's not good at it." Lena sighed. "She keeps saying she doesn't understand why you're so mad." I rubbed my temples. "Of course she doesn't." Lena hesitated. "Are you ever going to forgive them?" I swallowed. "I don't know." She nodded like she had expected that answer. "I get it." I studied her. "Are you ever going to call them out on their bullshit?" She let out a dry laugh. "I don't know." We both sat in silence for a moment, then burst into quiet, tired laughter. "Look at us," Lena muttered. "So emotionally well-adjusted." I smirked. "Therapist would have a field day." She nudged my foot with hers. "You'll call me when you get there?" I nodded. Of course. She hesitated again. You're really not coming back, are you? I exhaled. I don't think so. She swallowed, looking down at her food. Yeah, I figured. A beat of silence. Then she looked at me, small smile on her lips. Go be brilliant, okay? I smiled back. You too. And for the first time, we weren't just sisters caught in the middle of our parents' mess. We were just us. And that was enough. The next morning, I stood at the airport, staring at my boarding pass. One-way ticket. Boston. A new life. A new beginning. A place where I wasn't just Lena's sister or the forgotten twin. I was me. My phone buzzed. A text from my dad. Dad, good luck in Boston. I hope you find what you're looking for. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I turned off my phone, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the plane. Because I already had. The first thing I noticed about Boston was the air. It was crisp, different from the heavy, humid warmth of Detroit. Everything here felt sharper, cleaner, like the city itself was trying to wake me up, shake me out of the past. And maybe that was exactly what I needed. I stepped outside the airport, my suitcase rolling behind me, and inhaled deeply. This was it. No more looking back. No more waiting for validation that was never going to come. I was here, alone, on my own terms. And for the first time in my life, that didn't scare me. The McAllister Fellowship was intense. Days blurred into nights, nights into early mornings. The pressure was relentless. I spent hours poring over research, shadowing surgeons or running on caffeine and sheer determination. But unlike medical school, where I had worked hard just to prove my worth, here I was, surrounded by people who actually valued what I brought to the table. Dr. Whitmore had been right. Recognition did need to be public sometimes. My reputation had preceded me. The other fellows knew who I was, what I had achieved. And for the first time, I wasn't fighting to be seen. I was already seen. One night, after a brutal 12-hour shift, I collapsed onto my tiny apartment's couch and checked my phone. A text from Lena. Lena, how's life in Harvardland? I smiled, stretching my sore legs before typing back. Me. Busy. Exhausting. Kind of amazing. Her reply came seconds later. Lena, proud of you, sis. I stared at the screen, warmth spreading in my chest. Lena and I had talked nearly every week since I moved. Short calls between shifts, texts about ridiculous hospital drama, the occasional voice memo when we were too tired to type. It was strange how much closer we had become now that we were miles apart. Maybe distance had given us the space to be just sisters, without our parents' expectations pressing down on us. And I wasn't going to take that for granted. It took 3 months before my mother finally called. I saw her name flash on my screen after another grueling shift, and for a second, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But something in me told me to pick up. Hello? A long pause. Then, Claire. I leaned back against my bed frame, exhausted but curious. Hey, Mom. She hesitated, as if she wasn't sure what to say now that she actually had me on the phone. Then, how's Boston? I blinked, caught off guard. It's good. Busy. She hummed like she was thinking. We saw your fellowship announcement in the alumni magazine. I let out a small laugh. Of course you did. Another pause. Your father and I are proud of you, Claire. The words should have meant something. They didn't, because they had come too late. Still, I didn't feel angry. Just tired. Thanks, I said simply. Silence stretched between us. Finally, she spoke again, softer this time. Lena says you're doing well. I smiled. She's doing well too. She is, Mom agreed. She's been different lately. I knew what she meant. Lena was standing up for herself more. She had drawn her own boundaries, was making choices that weren't just about pleasing them. Maybe my leaving had changed more than just my own life. Claire, Mom's voice pulled me back. Would you ever consider coming home? I exhaled. There it was. The question I had been expecting since the moment I left. I thought about it. Detroit wasn't home anymore. I had built something here, something entirely my own. I had colleagues who respected me, mentors who saw my potential, a future I didn't have to fight for, and I wasn't about to give that up. No, I said finally. I don't think I will. She was quiet for a long time. Then she sighed. I figured. I didn't apologize, because I wasn't sorry. A year later, Lena came to visit. She showed up at my apartment with a duffel bag and a grin. flopping onto my couch like she owned the place. "So this is Boston," she said, glancing around. "Not bad, Dr. Monroe," I snorted. "You literally just got here." She stretched her arms over her head. "Yeah, but the air smells expensive, so I trust it." I rolled my eyes, but I was glad she was here. We spent the weekend exploring the city coffee shops, bookstores, a late-night diner with pancakes the size of my head. We talked about work, about dating or lack thereof, about how weird it was to be actual doctors now. And for the first time in years, it felt easy. No competition, no resentment, just us. On her last night, we sat on my tiny balcony, watching the city lights. Lena took a sip of her drink and sighed. "You really love it here, huh?" I nodded. "I do." She studied me for a moment. "I'm happy for you, Claire. Really." The first swallowed past the lump in my throat. "Thanks, Lena." She smiled. "You know, Mom still asks about you." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, she's trying," Lena admitted. "Not well, but she is." I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure trying was enough. But maybe, for now, it was all she had to offer. And maybe, for now, that was okay. The night before Lena left, she hugged me tightly at the airport. "I'll visit again soon," she promised. "I'll hold you to that," I said. She grinned, then turned to go. I watched her disappear through security, something settling in my chest. Lena and I had made it through the storm. And, while our parents' approval had once been the thing I craved most in the world, I realized now that I didn't need it. Because I had built something better. A life. A future. A version of myself that wasn't defined by anyone else. And for the first time, I was truly, completely free. Months later, on an ordinary Tuesday, I got a text from my dad. "Dad, your mother and I are thinking of coming to Boston for a weekend. Maybe we could get dinner?" I stared at it for a long time. Once, I would have jumped at the chance. Now, I wasn't so sure. But instead of overthinking it, I took a deep breath and typed back, "Me, I'll think about it." Then, I put my phone down, stepped out onto my balcony, and let the city wrap around me. My story wasn't finished. But for the first time in my life, I was the one writing it. Story 2. To our exciting new chapter at Sinclair Fine Foods. The most upscale restaurant in Boston, Ellsworth, had a private dining area where the crystal glasses clinked. Lead Meridian Capital investor, Edward Kingston, lifted his glass with real passion, and I grinned. I had finally gotten an $8 million investment to take over my family's specialty food company, National, after months of discussions. The investors were grinning, the champagne was flowing, and my parents looked happy than I had seen them in a long time. Madison Sinclair is my name. I gave up a bright future in finance 8 years ago in order to preserve my parents' failing gourmet business. I quit my 6-figure job for a family business that was 3 months away from going bankrupt, and everyone thought I was crazy. However, where others saw only danger, I saw opportunity. Vivian remarked, "I recall when your parents' store was just that little shop front in Cambridge. I was introduced to the investors by my former business school professor. Now take a look at those industrial agreements, internet subscriptions, and nationwide distribution. Amazing change." Madison. The investors' grateful nods filled me with pride. It had not been a simple voyage. I had established key alliances, relaunched our product line, reorganized operations, and created an e-commerce infrastructure from the ground up. From a well-liked neighborhood store, Sinclair Fine Foods has developed into a rising national brand, distributing our handcrafted condiments and specialty jams to 48 states. Without Madison's vision, none of this would have occurred, my father remarked, lifting his glass. We had no idea our firm would grow to its current size when Helen and I founded it 25 years ago. My mother grinned and nodded, but there was a pause in her expression that I was all too familiar with. I had painstakingly created growth plans, which the investors were discussing. Beneath the table, I felt my mother's fingers slide into mine. Leaning near enough to cover me with her perfume, she said, "Madison, dear, all of this is so thrilling. But keep in mind that William will be a stronger CEO for the family firm when he returns from his program next month. He has the proper knowledge for this scale, but you've done a great job laying the foundation. After earning his MBA, my brother William, the golden kid, had been touring Europe for the last year and seldom checked in on the family company. Using my blood, sweat, and tears, I had been reconstructing. I gripped my mother's hand back while maintaining a grin, but my stomach was getting cold. 8 years of working 18 hours a day, skipping holidays, and delaying personal time. Furthermore, she continued to view me as William's birthright's temporary carer. Is everything all right? Observing our conversation, Kingston inquired. Perfect, perfect. Gears were already turning under my smile as I responded and raised my glass higher. The arrival of Monday morning was eagerly anticipated when my father called with the news that altered everything. 8 years ago, I was Morgan Stanley's rising star. The family company was struggling. They had gone beyond by opening a second site, and their upscale cuisine products had been severely impacted by the recession. 3 months remained until they would have to permanently close. I can vividly recall how my coworkers reacted when I quit. "You're going to sell exquisite jam instead of finance?" My supervisor had questioned with astonishment. Even William, who was completing his undergraduate studies at the time, had questioned my choice. "Maddie," he had murmured, "it's a sinking ship. Find them and let it go. Another thing to do." However, I was unable to let it go. There was more to Sinclair Fine Foods than merely a store. My parents left it to me. As a child, I had watched them create recipes, procure ingredients from tiny family farms, and cultivate a personal connection with each client. I was protecting not just a company, but also a family dream when I left my financial job. It was a terrible first 2 years. During the day, I worked at the front desk, and at night, I spent my time looking at spreadsheets. I updated our financial processes, renegotiated supplier contracts, and sold our second facility. After funding our first e-commerce platform with a second mortgage on my apartment, I spent 6 months sleeping on a cot in the stockroom when I was unable to pay the rent and the mortgage. After graduating, William accepted an entry-level job with a consulting company. Although he was too busy advancing his own profession to assist with the family company, he occasionally provided counsel from the sidelines. My parents were always eager to emphasize out that he was obtaining essential expertise that will eventually help Sinclair Fine Foods, so they never seemed to lament his absence. In the meantime, I was changing the company. A culinary blogger saw our homemade preserves and shared an article that went viral. I used that publicity to launch a subscription box business, which currently has 20,000 members each month. Our sales increased by 340% last year. As a result of the agreements, I was able to establish with 3 national gourmet grocery chains. My parents' opinions of my efforts remained oddly conflicted throughout it all. They were appreciative, no doubt, but there was always a hint of transience in their admiration. Eventually, William would become the lone son and the firstborn. Unspoken family belief that my achievements seemed to be unaffected by it. I was brought back to the present by Madison Kingston's voice. The investors were staring at me with anticipation. I apologized as I collected myself. "Could you say that again?" "I wanted to know how you saw the leadership structure of the business developing in the future. According to Kingston, your operational strategy is great, but I want to confirm that we have the same management philosophy." My mother stiffened next to me as the question lingered. For years, I had been dreading and looking forward to this moment. The present leadership structure will not be altered. I spoke while being acutely conscious of my mother's gaze. In order to maintain the genuine family narrative that our clients identify with, my parents will continue to function as advisors and brand ambassadors while I remain as CEO. Nodding, Kingston made a note in his notebook. "How is your brother doing?" "He is doing an MBA program," Helen stated. My mother interrupted me before I could respond. "William recently graduated from Wharton with an executive MBA next month. He will join the leadership team and contribute insightful viewpoints from his consulting background." Despite the familiar sting, I maintained a neutral demeanor. In the last 8 years, William had visited the business precisely 3 weekends. However, my mother talked as though he had always played a crucial role in our development. Kingston's eyes moved from me to my mother. "I can definitely feel the stress. What part will he play?" "That hasn't been decided yet." Quickly, I replied, Closing this financing round is our top priority." My mother wasn't done, though. She went on to say with pride that William has always had the family's sharpest business sense. William has a deep understanding of the financial side that will be essential for this development, but Madison has done a fantastic job with the creative components. My drink almost suffocated me. William was unaware of the $8 million investment I had just received, reorganized our whole organization, and worked as a financial analyst prior to joining the family firm. But in my mother's perspective, he was the business guru somehow. I saw Kingston Exchange look at another important investor, Diane Thomas. A minor recalculation that I recognized from my years in finance caused something to change in the mood. They were reevaluating the agreement. Kingston said cautiously, "Miss S. Sinclair, Madison's vision and track record serve as a major foundation for our investment. Any major changes in leadership would need to be discussed before the agreement is finalized." My mother was taken aback, as though she had never considered the possibility that the investors, not the family name, would be supporting me. Uncomfortably, my father cleared his throat. He answered, Of course. Here, we're all in agreement. We are just proud parents that are thrilled to have both of our kids participating in what Madison has created. There are no hard and fast rules. The harm was done, but the topic of conversation changed to something safer. As the meal came to an end, I heard Kingston conversing softly with his group. When we said our goodbyes, they had a somber face. He shook hands more firmly than normal. "Let's talk," he whispered. "Just you on Monday morning?" I nodded, fully comprehending. My mother's meaning and the consequences for their $8 million had not escaped the investors' notice. I took the town vehicle back with my folks. They seemed unaware of what had just transpired, talking eagerly about William's homecoming. I had a plan in mind as I gazed out the window at the city lights going by. It was going to be an intriguing Monday. Really fascinating, in fact. That night I hardly slept at all, 6 a.m. I was sitting at my desk at the deserted Sinclair Fine Foods headquarters on Saturday, surrounded by 8 years' worth of documentation, market analyses, and spreadsheets. The cleaning crew seems taken aback that I was there on a weekend, but over the years they had become used to my unusual schedule. "Sinclair, miss, is everything all right?" Our head of maintenance, George, who had been with us since I took over, was asked. I said, not glancing up from my laptop, just getting ready for a big meeting. After yesterday night's elegant supper, another one. "You know you put in too much labor." In spite of me, I grinned. "George, thank you for your compassion, but this is a serious one. Possibly the most significant meeting I've ever attended." I called him after he departed, something I had been thinking about for months, but had put off out of devotion to my family. "Madison," Vivian said in a sleepy voice. "It's 6:30 on a Saturday." Even though my mentor and old professor had always been a trailblazer, this was going above and above. Without introducing myself, I continued, "I need your advice and possibly your help." After 45 minutes, Vivian arrived with 2 coffees and a resolute look on her face. She explained the problem, then took a seat back and looked closely at me. "You've been waiting for this day for years," she said. "Madison, what do you truly want?" As I thought about my response, the question lingered in the air. What was it that I desired? My parents' approval, the CEO role I was already holding, or something else completely? What I've earned is what I desire. I want to stop pretending that my family values my contribution, I eventually replied. Vivian gave a nod. "Let's make some calls after that." By midday, after talking with Kingston, I set up an urgent Sunday morning meeting with the investment team. Additionally, I had phoned my devoted staff members Tamara from product development, Jason from operations, and Daphne from marketing to invite them in for an urgent strategic meeting. These individuals had been with me from the start and had helped me build this business. William was off getting to know himself before getting his MBA. My parents wanted to talk about William's exciting business plans, so they called twice. The calls were sent to voicemail by me. William and my parents weren't the focus of this weekend. It has to do with protecting my future. Fine Foods came Sunday morning with a knot in my gut, Sinclair or not. Working on financial predictions till 3 in the morning. I had hardly slept. At precisely 9, Kingston and his group arrived, their faces displaying a mixture of interest and worry. As they took their seats in our conference room, Madison Kingston started. After 20 years in this industry, I've learned to believe on my gut. I'm worried about something that transpired at that supper. As I pushed papers across the table to each of them, I added, "You're right to be concerned." The Sinclair Fine Foods organizational chart is currently on page 1. If my parents get their way when the investment closes, I think it will look like page 2. William was listed as CEO in the second chart, but I was demoted to a vague, powerless creative director position. Kingston scowled. "We didn't talk about this when we were negotiating." "No," I concurred. "No, it wasn't. However, ever since I joined the company, that has been the unwritten plan in my family. William is the company's anticipated heir, regardless of my success." "What's on page 3, too?" I inhaled deeply as Diane Thomas flipped through her folder. "My counter-proposal is that." As the investors looked over the document, the room fell silent. It described a new organizational structure for the business that completely omitted my parents and the Sinclair name. "This is surprising," Kingston remarked. "At last, you're suggesting that we transfer our investment to a new organization under your direction?" "Yes," I responded, firmly looking into his eyes. "Allow me to demonstrate why that is financially advantageous for all parties." As I clicked through a presentation I had prepared overnight, I explained that the market validation already existed. The Sinclair name isn't particularly associated with our clientele. They relate to our brand narrative and product quality, both of which I developed. As I explained how our sales had increased, the investors listened carefully. I showed them customer surveys where I had led the initiatives that were most closely linked to our brand innovation, sustainability, and community connection. Not inherited features from my parents' first company. "How about the relationships in manufacturing?" Thomas was asked. "You would be starting from scratch, wouldn't you?" I gave a head shake. "Contract renewal provisions for our 3 primary manufacturing partners are scheduled for the upcoming quarter. I have personally kept those relationships going for years. They are aware of the true owner of this company." As the meeting progressed, I laid out a complete business plan for a new company, one that would leverage everything I'd built at Sinclair Fine Foods, but without the family complications. "This is impressive work for one weekend," Kingston remarked, "but I'm guessing you've been thinking about this for much longer." I nodded. "It's been my contingency plan for about 3 years. I've watched how my parents treat William versus how they treat me. I knew this day might come after 2 hours of discussion." Kingston leaned back in his chair. "We invested in you, Madison. Not just the company. The Sinclair brand has value, certainly, but you're the visionary who transformed it." He exchanged glances with his team. "We need to conduct proper due diligence on this new approach, but I'm inclined to divert our investment, as you've indicated, with certain tweaks to safeguard all parties." Relief washed over me. "Thank you. I was prepared to walk away with nothing if necessary. That wouldn't serve anyone's interests," Kingston answered. "Least of all ours. However, I have a requirement. You need to have an honest chat with your parents before we finish anything. Give them an opportunity to understand what they're about to lose." I wanted to reject to spare myself the inevitable anguish of that confrontation, but I knew he was correct. "I'll chat with them tonight." After the investors left, I met with my core team, the folks who had helped grow the firm alongside me. I hadn't told them about my contingency plan previously, unsure whether they would perceive it as treachery to the family company. "I often wondered whether you had an exit strategy," Daphne responded after I described the problem. "The way your folks talk about William, it was only a matter of time." Jason gave a nod. "Madison, we've collaborated with you for years, not under the name Sinclair. Do you mean that you would accompany me?" I inquired, taken aback by their prompt assistance. Tamara answered in a heartbeat. "Actually, we've previously talked about it. Given that William recently completed his MBA, we anticipated that this day would arrive. The last bit of confidence I needed came from knowing that my team had already chosen to follow me because they had foreseen this possibility. They were more than simply workers. They understood my worth and were my allies, even if my relatives didn't." I drove to my folks' place that night feeling oddly at ease. I had been battling for attention for years, attempting to demonstrate my value via hard work and accomplishments. But I get it now. Success would never alter their opinion of me. No matter how little he contributed or how well I performed, William would always be their preferred successor. My phone rang as I got into their driveway. William was the one phoning from the airport. "Hello," with a smile, he said. "Just touched down. Mom mentioned a significant investment. My comeback seems to be coming at the perfect time." I grinned to myself. "The time is ideal," I concurred. "I'll see you at work tomorrow." Tomorrow? Everything would change on Monday. My talk with my folks on Sunday night went just as I had anticipated. The idea that I would even entertain giving up the family tradition astounded my mother. Always the mediator, my father attempted to offer a middle ground where William and I could share leadership of the business. I informed them that I had been operating this firm alone for 8 years. Why would I now require a co-leader? Right before our expansion, William offers new insights. He's always had the family's sharpest business sense, and my mother urged, "What evidence is it based on?" I inquired. "I'm having trouble keeping my voice level." He left his consultancy position after 2 years. I reinvested my money into preserving our firm while paying for his MBA. My dad appeared to be in anguish. "Madison, please be understanding. The plan was always this. The eldest child is William." The first interrupted. "I'm 37 years old. Since I took control, the company's revenue has soared by 3,000%. Because of my execution and vision, I was able to acquire an investment of $8 million. However, none of it is important, since William was the first to be born, as he is your son, rather than your daughter." I learned all I needed to know from the stillness that ensued. Tradition and choice were their only defense. I have the support of the investors, not the name of the family. Finally, I said, "You have till tomorrow morning to choose whether you want to accept that fact or risk losing all I've worked so hard to create." In their living room, I left them speechless. Above the fireplace was a picture of my family from when I was a youngster, looking down at us. William in the forefront, off to the side, a little. That was how it had always been. I understood that I just had no desire to view it. The morning of Monday came clear and bright. Given that my parents usually came at 8:30, and that William had texted to say he would join for his first day, at 8:45, I had scheduled the investors to meet me at the office at 9 a.m. I got there around 7:30 to give myself time to collect my thoughts and get ready for what was about to happen. I was shocked to see that Tamara, Jason, and Daphne were already there, along with perhaps a dozen other important staff members. "Why are you all here at such an early hour?" I inquired. Daphne grinned. "You're not alone in this, and we wanted you to know that. We're with you no matter what happens today." I almost lost my temper at the gesture, but I was able to nod appreciatively before withdrawing to my office to go over my notes. My parents entered the room one last time at precisely 8:30, their faces tight but resolute. My mum had on formal attire, as though she were attending a significant presentation. The disagreement from last night was obviously wearing on my father, who seemed exhausted. At 8:42, William walked in a fancy suit, with the easy assurance of someone who has never had to struggle for acceptance. He shook hands with staff members he hardly knew and expressed his excitement about taking over the family firm. From my glass-walled office, I observed him working the space, already assuming the CEO job without having merited it. My mother smiled proudly, showing him different parts of the operation, as though he were a visiting dignitary, instead of someone who should have spent the last 8 years in the trenches with us. The lift doors opened at exactly 9 in the morning, and Kingston entered with his investment team and 2 individuals I knew as legal department partners from Meridian Capital. Employees sensed that something important was about to happen, and the office mood instantly changed. My mom ran over and held out her hand. "Your presence here is greatly appreciated, Mr. Kingston. Let me introduce you to William, my son." He just got back from Kingston and gently but strongly interrupted her. "Actually, Mrs. Sinclair, I believe it would be good for all of you to join us in the conference room. But we are here to talk to Madison. The time has come for the reckoning." As everyone sat down, the tension in the conference room was palpable. I sat at the head of the table, with my parents and William on one side and the investment team on the other. Cold commercial realities was set to clash, with years of unsaid familial relations. Kingston unfolded a number of paperwork from his suitcase. "I want to make a crucial clarification before we start. Madison's leadership and vision for this business were the reasons Meridian Capital's investment was accepted. Her performance history, team, and development plan were the main topics of our due diligence." William moved in his chair uneasily. The smile on my mother's face cemented itself. Kingston went on from the conversation on Friday night. We've had to reconsider our stance. It's now evident that expectations for the company's future leadership may differ somewhat. My dad cleared his throat. Both of our children have always contributed their special talents to Sinclair Fine Foods, which we have always envisioned as a genuine family company. Diane Thomas, with all due respect, interrupted Mr. Sinclair. Our investment was based on leadership continuity. By transforming this corporation from on the verge of bankruptcy to a national contender, Madison has shown remarkable commercial ability. Our agreement will be materially altered if that leadership changes significantly. William bent over. He hasn't been involved with the firm for the last 8 years, despite the assurance in his voice. I can guarantee you that I am also well qualified due to my executive MBA and consulting experience. To what end? Kingston made a direct request to replace the individual who first obtained this money, salvaged the firm, and raised its worth by 3,000%. There was silence in the room. My mom's face had turned white. Her gaze flitted from Kingston to William. "We have a suggestion," Kingston said as he shoved a packet in my parents' direction. "Actually, there are 2 choices. I advise you to go over them thoroughly." My parents' hands were shaking when they opened the folder. There were 2 legal documents within. In the first, the initial investment contract was described in clear terms, guaranteeing that I would continue as CEO for at least 5 years while William was restricted to a non-executive position. The second document, which had nothing to do with the Sinclair brand or family ownership, was a term sheet for a $10 million investment in a new business that I would start and run. "What is this?" my dad inquired. He hardly raised his voice beyond a whisper. "Insurance, in case you're still unaware of what this organization truly has to offer," I gently responded. William's cheeks flushed as he studied the contents of the second page and grabbed it. "You're threatening to launch a rival company? Your own household. I'm safeguarding the value I've established." I corrected him. "William, value that you did not create. When I was sleeping, where were you? Making payroll on a cot in the stockroom. We couldn't afford shipping. Therefore, I was personally delivering items at that time." My mother looked stunned as I worked the register, reconfiguring our whole product line. "You can't mean to give up your family's legacy, Madison." The door to the meeting room opened before I could reply. Jason, Tamara, and at least 15 other staff members, many of whom had worked for the organization for years, entered after Daphne. "I apologize for the interruption," Daphne stated in a bold and clear voice. "However, we wanted to communicate something. We accompany Madison if she departs to launch a new business. Every one of us." Whispers filled the room. The gathered staff, the company's lifeblood, left my parents gaping in shock. They believed they were in charge of the decisions. "Yours. Recognize what I've made and who built it," I added softly, "or see me go with everything that adds value to our business." The shuffling of papers was the only sound in the meeting room for over 10 minutes. William and my dad looked over the papers in front of them. Kingston and his group anxiously waited. The staff members who had joined me stood at the room's perimeter, serving as a visible reminder of the company's actual worth. With a heavy groan, my father finally moved the first paper ahead. "We'll sign this one," he stated in a defeated tone. "Madison continues to serve as CEO." My mother nodded in agreement, but her lips were squeezed into a narrow line. William appeared to be in astonishment. His meticulously planned future was falling apart in front of him. "A smart decision," Kingston replied, gesturing to his legal staff to complete the documentation. It was finished 2 hours later. The investment would move forward with clear safeguards for my job. William would become the company's business development vice president, a job that placed him beneath me and had distinct boundaries and a reporting system. My parents would become brand advocates and completely withdraw from day-to-day management. 6 months have passed since then. Sinclair Fine Foods is doing well today. Our new product lines have surpassed sales forecasts by 40%, and we are expanding nationally ahead of schedule. We appear to be a charming example of family business success from the outside. The truth is more nuanced. My connection with William and my parents is completely professional. Although we are friendly, our conversations are only about business. On holidays, I go to the required family dinners, but I no longer look to them for validation or approval. Not all wounds heal. They simply become a part of your identity. I learned a great lesson from the treachery. My family's acceptance of me doesn't define my value. The group that supported me that Monday morning, willing to forego security in the sake of justice and fidelity, is my real family. Even though my business cards include the Sinclair name, my true legacy is wholly owned. Story 3, she won't be left alone by you. My voice cracked in terror as I yelled into my phone. I was having trouble breathing since my heart was beating so quickly. Just seconds before, I had heard my daughter Melody's panicked voice, and the hospital room felt abruptly smaller, the walls closing in. Grandma, Grandpa, and Mommy simply drove off. I'm by myself here. Over the phone, she had cried. They stated, I'm old enough to be left alone and that they're attending Uncle Peter's party. I'm afraid. Christina Harper is my name. Tina. To all those who are acquainted with me, and after losing my husband, Michael, to a vehicle accident 3 years ago, I am a 36-year-old widow doing my best to raise my 10-year-old daughter. Since the passing of her father, Melody has battled anxiety. I occasionally wake up with nightmares because I'm afraid I could experience the same thing. Now, by leaving her when she needed protection, my in-laws had validated her worst fears. The majority, Tina. You're going overboard. Gerald, my father-in-law, snorted into the phone. She must become more resilient. She is no longer a baby. In a few hours, we will return. A couple of hours? I almost let out a yell. She is 10. Leaving a child that age alone is against the law. Return right now to my residence. We're halfway to Peter's already. Barbara, my mother-in-law, added her voice. The entire family will be present for his 60th birthday. Melody was also invited, but she declined. She can choose to do it. What I was hearing was unbelievable. After an emergency gallbladder operation, I found myself unable to leave the hospital. And because a party was more essential, they had left their sole grandchild, my kid, behind. Right now, I'm giving my neighbor Janet a call to see how Melody is doing. My voice trembled with anger as I spoke. And you will never again have unattended access to my kid once I leave tomorrow. Barbara replied dismissively. As usual, you're being dramatic, Tina. Michael would have gotten it. It's you who is softening her. The last straw was using my late spouse against me. We're done talking. Don't come near my residence. I quickly contacted Janet, who lived across the street, after hanging up. Thankfully, she responded straight fast and said she would go check on Melody right away. I knew this was only the beginning as I hung up, shaking with dread and rage. There was a terrible ache in my chest, not from the operation, but rather from this profound betrayal by those who were meant to assist me in safeguarding my most valuable assets. My parenting had always been undermined by Michael's parents, but this went too far. I made a self-promise to be different with my own family because I didn't have constant supervision growing up. I met Michael in college. I was pursuing a degree in education while he was studying engineering. At the age of 26, I gave birth to Melody, and we were contentedly constructing our lives together. Gerald and Barbara, however, never really liked me. They made subtle remarks about my parenting and housekeeping, believing their son had married below him. Rhythm. Michael served as a barrier between us and always stood up for me. However, that thin barrier vanished after his death. For years, the tension had been increasing. Every family get-together turned into a labyrinth of unwanted advice and passive-aggressive remarks. Tina, she's too attached to you. Melody would cling to my leg as Barbara spoke. With me, Michael was never like that. We instilled independence in him at a young age, which is why. And you're weakening her, Gerald would add. Despite these difficulties, I made an effort to keep them and Melody together. I felt that having grandparents in her life was crucial since they were the only thing that connected her to her father. For Melody's sake, I swallowed my pride, nodded in agreement with their criticisms, and maintained the peace. I hurried to the emergency room 3 days ago and woke up with terrible stomach ache. I was diagnosed with acute colic by the doctors, cystitis. I had to get my gallbladder removed right away. I was worried about Melody. I phoned everyone I knew, but Janet's work schedule only allowed her to assist part-time, and my closest friends were out of town. I contacted Gerald and Barbara in despair. They consented to spend the 3 days I would be in the hospital at our home, apparently pleased to assist. As I went into surgery, I felt a wave of relief, knowing that Melody would be taken care of. I even felt bad about ignoring them for so many years. You see, Tina, In times of difficulty, family is what counts. Barbara had remarked so while she prepared my hospital stay overnight bag. Despite our disagreements, we are here when it matters. I trusted her. I entrusted them with my most valuable possession. When I phoned to check in yesterday, everything appeared to be going well. Melody sounded a little reserved, but I thought it was because she was missing me. There wasn't any indication that they would opt to forego my daughter, their grandchild, for a party today. As I waited for Janet to return my call, I came to the realization that this was more than a single instance of poor judgment. I had been oblivious to the danger, and this was who they really were. After 5 minutes, Janet phoned back. Now I'm with Melody. She gave me comfort. She's agitated, but, well, she is currently eating cookies with my kid at my place after I brought her here. She can stay with me until tomorrow, when you are released. I felt a wave of relief. I'm not sure how to express my gratitude, Janet. Don't thank me, she firmly responded. They committed the crime of child abandoning. You must report this, Tina. I paused. They are her grandparents, Michael's parents. Additionally, they left a 10-year-old youngster alone at a party. Janet's tone became stern. You underwent urgent surgery. What if things had gone wrong? What if tomorrow you are unable to return home? She was correct. I felt as though I had been physically struck by the possibility of what may have occurred. What if the fire had occurred? What if Melody had suffered harm? What if there had been an intruder? That night, from my hospital bed, I made a painful call to Child Protective Services. The social worker took down my statement in a gentle but serious tone. This wasn't just a family dispute, she clarified. Child endangerment was evident in this instance. She clarified that we would have to look into and record this incident. According to state law, leaving a kid at that age is considered neglect. My phone rang again as soon as I hung up. Gerald was the one. What on earth? Tina, a federal agency called us just now and said they needed to interview us about Melody. What did you say to them? The reality. My voice was remarkably steady as I answered that when I was in the hospital, you left my kid to attend a party. It wasn't some crazy party. It was a family get-together. She was also completely safe. Gerald, she was afraid. Since her father, she has struggled with anxiety. You abandoned her after your kid passed away. This is absurd, he yelled. Her grandparents are us. We are entitled to certain rights. Something broke inside of me. Rights? You believe you have rights when you leave a youngster alone? Gerald, you have obligations that you totally disregarded. Similar to how you left. Rhythm. Barbara is sobbing as a result of your actions. Trying to make me feel bad, he said. Following everything that we have done for you. Apart from criticizing and undermining me, what have you done specifically? Ever since Michael passed away? Now, instead of shivering with dread, my voice was quivering with wrath. I apologized to Barbara for her distress, but I'm more worried about my traumatized kid. Tomorrow, I'll be at home. Furthermore, neither of you should come to my residence. He thundered, You can't stop us from seeing Melody. Observe me. After responding, I hung up. My hospital room seemed chilly and deserted that night. I questioned whether I had overreacted as I looked at the ceiling. However, Melody's terrified voice could be heard each time I closed my eyes. I'm alone here, Mommy. No, I hadn't gone too far. I had been too patient for too long, if anything. The next morning, I was released from the hospital. I was taken up by Janet, who told me about Melody's night when we were driving home. Janet muttered that she had a hard time falling asleep, asked often whether you were indeed returning home today. My heart hurt. Did she elaborate on what transpired? Janet paused. She said that they had already abandoned her. I almost choked. What? They apparently left her house for around an hour yesterday to go grocery shopping. They told her not to call you while you were recuperating, so she didn't. I felt a wave of white-hot rage. Twice they had left her and tricked her into not speaking up. Melody sprang into my arms and clung to me like she always did when we got to Janet's house. Following Michael's passing, Mom, you've returned. In my shoulder, she wailed. I said, I'm here, sweetie. Holding her close while battling the pain from my surgical incision, I sincerely apologize for what transpired. I reset the codes on our electronic door locks later that afternoon, after we had returned to our house. Even though I was still recovering from surgery, I was determined to change the physical locks, so I called a locksmith. Melody's eyes were wide as she watched me. Our grandparents are returning, Quietly, she asked. I carefully considered my words as I sat next to her on the couch. No, honey, not for a while. Their actions were dangerous and incorrect. I was acting like a baby, they said. Melody muttered. Daddy wouldn't be proud of me being so afraid, according to my grandfather. My throat grew enraged. It was unacceptable to use Michael against our daughter. Your father would be very pleased with you, I spoke firmly. When you felt unsafe, you had the courage to call me. That was precisely the proper course of action. By evening, Gerald, Barbara, and even Michael's brother Peter were texting and calling me nonstop. At last, I took Peter's call. You have to relax, Tina, he began. Mom and Dad are inconsolable. They claim that you changed the locks and reported them to child services. On 2 occasions, they left my daughter Peter behind. I sounded like ice. To attend your birthday celebration, they left a 10-year-old alone. See, they were wrong. I interrupted. A mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pick someone up from soccer practice. Deliberately leaving a child alone after being trusted with her care is a choice. They're family. Tina, Melody's grandparents. Being family doesn't give them the right to endanger my child, I replied. Would you leave your kids alone at that age? His silence was telling. That's what I thought, I continued. I filed a formal report, and yes, I've changed the locks. They're not welcome in my home until they acknowledge what they did and take steps to earn back my trust. After hanging up, I found 3 voicemails from Barbara, each progressively more hostile. Tina, this is absurd. Gerald and I have never done anything but love Melody. The first one began the second. You're turning our granddaughter against us. Michael would be horrified by your behavior. And the third left just minutes ago. We're consulting with a lawyer about grandparents' rights. You can't keep us from seeing Melody. You've gone too far this time. I deleted them all, hands shaking. I knew the thread about grandparents' rights might not be empty. They had the resources for legal action, but I also knew I had documentation of their neglect, and protecting Melody was worth whatever battle lay ahead. As I tucked Melody into bed that night, she looked up at me with teary eyes. Am I in trouble with Grandma and Grandpa? No, sweetheart, I assured her. They're the ones who made a bad choice, not you. You're safe now. But when I kissed her goodnight, I worried if any of us were genuinely secure from what was coming next. The next morning, I received an email from CPS saying they'd launched an investigation. The social worker, Miss Patterson, would be questioning all parties involved, commencing with a house visit that afternoon. The email also contained links concerning kid safety and family therapy. I was escorting Melody to the bus station when my phone called again. Barbara's number. I refused the call, but a text came immediately. We're coming over at noon to speak. This has gone far enough. My palms shook as I texted back. Do not come to my residence. I will call the cops if you arrive up unannounced. 3 dots appeared, faded, then appeared again before her response came through. You wouldn't dare try me. I wrote back after seeing Melody safely on board the school bus. I reported possible undesirable guests by calling the non-emergency police line. When I described the CPS investigation and said I would have a patrol car drive by 11:55 at noon, the officer seemed understanding. Gerald's SUV arrived in my driveway, as promised. They marched up to my door, and I observed from the front window. Barbara's expression was determined. When they discovered that their key would not fit the new lock, Gerald became enraged. As Gerald banged on the door, Barbara kept ringing the doorbell. I didn't open it. Rather, the first used the video doorbell to communicate. Don't come, I said. Leave my property, please. This is absurd. The camera was yelled at by Gerald. Seeing our granddaughter is a right. You have no right to remain on my property after I've asked you to go, and your granddaughter is in school. We've informed the cops. Just like clockwork, a patrol car arrived. I observed through the glass as the police casually walked up and started talking to Gerald and Barbara. Gerald made frantic gestures towards my house, his face getting redder. They eventually returned to their SUV and drove off, giving my door one more stare. The policeman softly knocked. Harper, miss. Now they're gone. Is it your intention to formally announce the situation? I ushered him in and gave him the rundown. The CPS report, the abandonment, and their appearance, even though I specifically asked not to attend. He made notes, told me they wouldn't be returning today, but said if the harassment persisted, I would want to think about getting a temporary restraining order. I sat on my couch after he went, exhausted both mentally and physically. I realized I hadn't taken my pain medicine when my eyes throbbed at the sight of my operation. In the middle of all the confusion that morning, my phone rang once more. It was Jessica, Peter's wife, this time. "What's happening, Tina?" Mom and Dad just phoned Peter, sobbing, and said they were removed out of your house by the cops. I let out a sigh. I specifically instructed them not to attend, and they showed up without an invitation. They were only asked to leave by the cops. "You're going too far, don't you think?" Jessica inquired. "They made a mistake, but it put my child in risk." I cut you off. "If your sons were 10 years old, would you have left them alone?" Jessica paused. "Well, no. However, don't expect me to put up with anything you wouldn't put up with for your own kids." I hung up and went to Facebook, where my alerts were overflowing. Barbara had posted a lengthy, self-pitying statement about being wrongfully accused of negligence and kept away from our beloved grandchild. She tagged a number of relatives, who were now leaving perplexed and worried comments. Although reading her public misrepresentation of events made me physically sick, there were some insightful remarks mixed in with the condolences for Barbara. "Hold on. Did you truly abandon Melody throughout Tina's hospital stay?" That sounds incorrect. "Did you not attend Peter's party that evening? Was Melody also present?" The truth was beginning to come to light. They were trying to steer the story, but I wasn't prepared for the significant plot surprise that was developing. The family was starting to doubt their account of what had happened. 3 days later, while Melody was at school, Miss Patterson from CPS sat in my living room, completing her interview with me. "There is enough evidence to support your claim of child neglect based on our investigation thus far, including our conversations with your in-laws," she stated, going over her notes. "Your in-laws have acknowledged leaving your daughter alone twice, but they maintain that it was brief and that she was secure through the whole ordeal. Now what?" I inquired, anxiety mixed with relief. "The following week, we will finish our report. Even though there are no criminal charges associated with this, it will be documented in case there are any more occurrences." She stopped and gave me a close look. "Have you given family counseling any thought? If you want to let them back into your lives in the future, it might be beneficial to set limits." I said, "I'm not sure I do, or not in the same manner anyhow." I opened my email after she departed and saw a message from an unfamiliar lawyer. The subject line chilled me to the bone. "Gerald and Barbara Miller are represented, regarding the rights of grandparents to visit." I opened it, my hands trembling. The letter was written clearly yet formally. In order to legally seek visiting rights with Melody, Gerald and Barbara had hired legal counsel. It claimed that I was alienating them without cause, citing their deep and meaningful relationship with their granddaughter. Moving too fast still caused pain from my surgery incision. An ongoing reminder of the day my in-laws put a party ahead of my daughter's security. I sent the email to my friend Elaine, a lawyer, and asked her opinion. In a matter of minutes, she gave me a call. First, she said, "Don't freak out. Secondly, their hand is being overplayed. Grandparents' rights cases are notoriously hard to win, particularly when there is an active CPS neglect finding. If it comes to that, I'd be pleased to act as your representative. Thank you." My voice broke as I spoke. How they have completely turned this around is beyond me. They frequently change the story by pretending to be the victims or by refusing to take responsibility, Elaine said. "However, the evidence is in your favor, Tina. Melody and I were having dinner that night when the doorbell rang. Peter was standing there by himself, looking uneasy, when I looked at the video feed. After a moment of hesitation, I opened the door. "Can we have a conversation?" Quietly, he asked. I opened the door for him. In the dining room, keeping an eye on Melody, I talked to the sister of Jessica. He started to sit rigidly on my couch's edge. She works as a psychologist for kids. She claimed that what Melody's parents did was completely out of place and might have caused her trauma. He combed his hair with his hand. I didn't want to think they would act in such a careless manner, nor did I. I spoke quietly. I trusted them with her care because of this. Peter appeared to be in real distress. When they arrived at my gathering, I was unaware that Melody was by herself. They explained to everyone that she wasn't with them because you had arranged for other care. I was taken aback by this fresh insight. They told the whole family lies. "I'm afraid so." He turned to Melody, who was nervously observing us from the dining room. "Could I talk to her?" I apologized for not personally checking up on her. I nodded, and Peter and Melody had a gentle conversation for a few minutes, during which time Melody began to relax. Before departing, he looked to me again. I've instructed Mom and Dad to drop the legal threats. Jessica and I won't support them if they continue this way. His look was grim. Michael wouldn't have stood for this, and neither should we. I felt a startling lightness as I shut the door behind him. I was afraid that the family alliance was breaking up. It was because the truth was finally coming to light, not because of what I had done. I got an SMS from Barbara that evening. We must have a conversation without solicitors. The next stage of this battle appeared to be on the horizon, but I felt like I wasn't battling alone for the first time. I sat across from Gerald and Barbara in my living room a week later. My legal friend Elaine sat next to me, and their lawyer, Mr. Bradshaw, who had a severe appearance, sat on each side of them. Days of negotiations had resulted in a formal agreement between us at the coffee table. Since she had come into my house, Barbara had not talked to me directly. Her red-rimmed eyes were rebellious. Gerald appeared to be getting older. Somehow, the assurance that had always been a part of him significantly faded. Professionally, let's go over the terms one last time, Elaine remarked. The Millers admit that leaving Melody alone was a poor decision. Before they resume unsupervised visits with Melody, they agree to finish 3 family therapy sessions and 6 sessions of a grandparenting education program. Mr. Bradshaw gave a rigid nod. Additionally, Ms. Harper consents to allow supervised visits in the meantime and dismiss the CPS case, beginning with 2 hours at neutral venues twice a month. I verified those phrases by looking at my in-laws personally. This has nothing to do with punishment. It's about safety, Melody, and making sure that this doesn't happen again. Gerald cleared his throat. As they scribbled their signatures on the page, we will sign even if we still believe this has been exaggerated. I was relieved that the fight was over and hopeful that healing could start, but I didn't feel victorious or satisfied. When they were gone, I saw Melody sitting on her bed with the picture of Michael she kept on her bedside table in her hand. Our grandparents are still upset with me. Her voice was small as she requested. I put my arm around her shoulders and sat next to her. Sweetheart, they were never truly angry with you. They are depressed about the state of affairs, but we will all cooperate to improve it. Will I see them again? Indeed, but for a while things would be a little different, I told her. To ensure that everyone feels appreciated and protected, we're establishing some new guidelines. 3 months later, Melody demonstrated how to use the tablet she had received for her birthday to Gerald, while I sat on a seat in the park. Barbara sat close by and paid attention as Melody described a game she liked. Melody was called in by Peter and Jessica's boys while they played on the swings. Although challenging, the family therapy sessions were essential. Barbara and Gerald had been protective at first. However, the therapist expertly led us through discussions about respect, limits, and the trauma that Michael's death had given us all. The influence of the grandparenting classes had been much more significant. During our most recent therapy appointment, Barbara acknowledged that they had been raising Melody in the same manner as they had their sons in the 1980s, anticipating her independence. Maybe too early, and putting more emphasis on toughness than emotional support. We were mistaken. The phrases she had used were obviously challenging for her. The world has changed. Since children are unique, we must also be unique. A perfect reconciliation was not achieved. Tension still existed at times. Instances where the resurgence of ancient patterns was threatened. However, there was advancement. Genuine, significant advancement that was especially advantageous to music. Janet texted me and my phone chimed. "How are things going?" "Better than imagined," I said with a smile. In fact, they are paying attention to her. Janet was now a member of the vast support system I had established for Melody. I had discovered the dangers of depending too much on one source of assistance. Melody now had Janet, Peter, and Jessica, my friend Elaine, and a number of other reliable adults in her life, in addition to Gerald and Barbara. I experienced a range of feelings when I saw my daughter laugh at something Gerald said. It wasn't the vengeful gratification I had previously envisioned, but rather something more worthwhile. The assurance that I had kept my kid safe while maintaining her ties to her father's side of the family. This was the definition of true triumph, making relationships healthy for all parties involved rather than ruining them.